Let's look at artificial physics, man-made physics. And let's examine a little more specifically the effects of artificial frequencies or man-made frequencies on our body and their dangers. We talk about electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies, refrigerator, nuclear pollution. Magnets is another form of pollution, and noise pollution, which is obvious. The electromagnetic pollution is measured in milligauss or microtesla. The safe level should be less than 0.1 milligauss. What's unique about this type of pollution is that it always exists where you have electrical appliances. One thing to be aware that some appliances, probably most of them, even if they're off, to turn off, whether it's radio, clock radio, or any electric device, if it's plugged to the wall, it still has the pollution. It doesn't go down or doesn't disappear. So if you want to get rid of it, you have to unplug the instrument, whatever it is, from the wall. Typically, within 2 or 3 feet, the levels go down. They can be high, very high, especially around the electric box or very heavy electrical equipment. But usually within few feet, it goes to level relatively safe. As I will say again and again, there's really no safe level for any man-made pollution. Another thing to be aware that sometimes when the grounding is not proper or you have metallic object in your home, like in your box spring, women that have metal in the bra, it can create a situation where this pollution is being amplified. The only way to really make sure that you don't have high levels, not only near the devices, but also in the middle of the room, away from devices, is to actually measure it with an EMF meter that measure it in milligauss or Tesla. I can give you many clinical cases or experience I have with patients because I've been doing this for 14 years. The information I'm giving you today, I, in essence, educate all my patients. Some choose to listen, some choose to ignore. I do sometimes newborn checkups that come from the midwives. And of course, I checked the baby was fine, and I gave the information to the family. They choose to ignore it. 5 months later, they come with very strange complaint. They say that the head of the baby is square, and it really looks square. It was strange. What even more worrisome that his fontanelle, or the little opening gap you have at the top of the head that usually closes between year to 2 years, was totally closed. So that's really what's worrisome. So little investigation and giving them a meter to check their house, they found out that baby was sleeping 3 feet away from one of these electric filters. So 12 hours a day and night, total of 12 hours approximately, he was next to his head near the crib, about 3 feet away. And when they checked the pollution, it was giving a range of 3 milligauss. The head of the baby was 3 milligauss for 12 hours a day. So we treated him with biosyntony, which I'll talk later. And within 3 months, the head became normal. The baby was actually much better. It was a nice baby, become much more alert, and everything was fine. And they sent him to the university hospital. They felt that since everything else was okay, he was fine. So that's an example. We solved the problem and treated him with regenerating the energy, which I explain later, and the baby was fine. I'll give you another actually interesting example. Sometimes if you have high power lines, even street power lines close to your house, you may have high reading of EMF in milligauss, very high in the house. And actually have a case, very interesting, because it shows you how it can affect you emotionally. They found out that they were right under not very high voltage, but major power lines, probably intermediary, right above their house pretty much. And the whole house, the whole area gave high reading inside the house, regardless of the appliances. So we did the appropriate protection, and it was interesting that the girl was 8 years old, wonderful girl, started to become OCD. She will stay 2-3 hours on the toilet, very unpleasant and very disturbing. But guess what? Once they protected the house properly, her symptoms disappear. Which is very interesting. So that's an example. There is on my website, you see the link here, a document with about 200 scientific papers that showed you the effect of EMF, not the radio frequency, but the EMF. Actually, it has been determined, according to government information, if you're more than 3 milligauss, you almost guarantee you'll have some health problems. There was a lady that contacted me from New York after she became very sensitive to electromagnetic pollution, this kind of pollution, which is actually becoming more and more of a problem in our society. And she already did a lot of investigation before she came to us for the protection devices. And she told me that she had this Gauss meter, and when she checked her house, she found out that there was one point in the house where the levels were constantly 8.5 milligauss. And that's exactly what the place where her husband was sitting for years, and he died 3 years earlier from cancer. So for me, it's obvious that that, in this case, was a major cause. And I have many other examples, but just give you the tip of the iceberg. The other type of pollution is radio frequency pollution, which we measure in microwatts per square meter, usually much more rapid frequency. They're actually no safe levels. They should be no more than 1 microwatt per square meter. However, people are very sensitive, can get sick, and very disturbing side effects even with this kind of pollution. However, most people that are healthy will do okay. Again, I want to stress, it doesn't mean it's okay for you to be in this type of pollution. It does affect your body. It may be very slow and build up, and you may never make the connection because you don't have the immediate side effect like some people, but it will affect your health in the long run. So this is also interesting fact. There are actually over 5,000, let's say 8,000 scientific papers that show without any exceptions that all this thing we're talking today is very, very harmful to your health. Unfortunately, it's a very powerful industry. The communication industry and the electrical industry with the smart meter, which we'll talk briefly, their research claims that all this pollution is safe. Now what happened is because of politics, corruption, and you decide why it is like that, even though the few research papers that were done by industry paid for and people that work for the industry claim for high levels to be safe, thousands of other papers show the opposite. And when somebody analyzes the scientific significance of the research made by the interested companies, industry, were very poor scientifically, very little value and significance. And in comparison, all the works they analyzed are done by independent scientists were much highly accurate and more reliable scientifically and much more significant. This is ACGIH. You can check them online, USA ACGIH. It's an interest group created by all these companies that created this pollution. They tell you that 10,000 milligauss, only 10,000 above is unsafe. This is beyond absurd. The Bioinitiative report that was done by a group of scientists internationally, that also is probably influenced by industry, but they tell you that you have to have less than 1 milligauss, which is actually much more accurate. The Austrian Medical Association tells you there should be less than 0.2 milligauss. This is a conversion from milligauss to microtesla. There is another slide that actually shows that if you talk about the radio frequency, the industry tells you that levels at 10 million times the 1 microwatt per square meter is safe, which is actually beyond absurd. They have patients that have levels of several thousand and actually to abandon the house, they got so sick. If you don't find the slide, let me just tell you that the RF, according to the Austrian, should be less than 0.1 microwatt per square meter. You draw your own conclusion. And there's the link if you want to research it more. Oh, here is the other slide talking about the radio frequency. You see, they tell you that 10 million microwatt per square meter, short term 30 minutes is okay. This is literally, I mean, you cannot make this up. It's unbelievable. Now, the Bioinitiative tell you that's 1,000 microwatt per square meter. I can tell you from my experience and what I saw with patients, because all my patients today measured the pollution in the home, this almost guarantee everybody to get sick. It really should be, according to the Austrian, less than 0.1 microwatt per square meter, and be really aware. Even that is really not safe. And some extremely sensitive people may even react to this type of frequencies. So as you can see, the higher frequency the wave, there's more energy, the more harmful to the body. And of course, wave, you're talking about frequency and wavelength. And the more the frequency, the higher is the energy, the more potentially damaging to the body. This is, it gives you the magnetic spectrum in the slide. So those are several common meters. This is in the middle, it's called tri-field meter. It's obviously not digital. It's very accurate. It's good only for EMF measure in milligauss. Then you have acoustic measure. It's very easy to use because it gives you a clear readout. It measures only radio frequency, and it has different light, but it's very easy to read. I like the coronet, even though it takes a little learning because the different buttons that you have to learn to push and learn how to use it. The advantage is it's relatively inexpensive, and it measures also radio frequency and low frequency or EMF frequency in microtesla or milligauss, and also radio frequency. So that's very handy. It's also small. Just to give you an idea, this one, little one, is about $160. This one about 130 to 160. The one that does only EMF, and the acoustimeter is 450. Now they're more professional and accurate ones, but for the average person is more than enough. The advantage of the coronet, the little one here, also that it has antenna inside, so you can actually see where the radiation coming from. So if you, for example, have cell phone antenna is affecting your house, you can actually see which antenna brings you more radiation and so forth, or where is the source of radiation. So this is something that I recommend to everybody to either, we rent them, but you can buy them if you want and find exactly what's going on. The problem with radio frequency, just like the EMF measured in Gauss, is that it's not predictable. It's even less predictable than EMF that we talked before, because you can have no Wi-Fi at home, but because of neighbor smart meters, cell phone antennas, metallic object, diffraction from roof or even from walls of houses next to you, you can have a situation where you have very high reading. In fact, I had people who have no Wi-Fi in the house because they knew better, but they have very high levels of radiation because of external sources. Also, we're finding out that especially in rural area, even if you're very far away from cell phone antenna, you can still be affected severely, and the only way to know is to measure it. Usually in town, if you're more than 1 mile, you mostly will be pretty much safe, but in rural areas, you have a case of severe pollution from 2.5 miles away antenna. They had this instrument and measured and found out which antenna was the problem. And they actually moved to an 11-acre in rural area, running away from cell phone antenna to find out that they had smart meter and cell phone antenna far away, which was affecting them severely. The point is that you really cannot just go to the internet and find out where all the cell phone antenna. Without measuring, you don't have the whole picture, and you can miss some very important things that can be very harmful. If you just think about it, the pollution is not only on land. You have thousands of satellites from space radiating all kinds of frequencies. I remember I had a patient some years ago, and he was telling me that he worked for the bank and he has to go every afternoon after they transmit to satellite with microwave the data from the bank to the satellite to the central bank, and his job was to collect all the dead birds on the roof near the antennas. You draw your own conclusions. This is just the launches in 211. Obviously, we have thousands of satellites in space, and who knows what kind. If you don't know, just tell you a little factor which is very important that also give you perspective what the situation is with our science, that you can, if you really understand, it's actually in a way mad science that's going to hurt humanity. It's already hurting until hopefully they wake up, hopefully sooner than later. You see, the ionized gases, there is an ionized gas belt around Earth that it's a natural filter. So a lot of the waves that comes from space could be very harmful, but it actually filters out the bad waves. Now, what happened when you put all the satellite and HAARP project, H-A-A-R-P, you want to check it out if you never heard about it, it creates pollution in the ionosphere. So what happened is that even the natural wave being affected, so even the energy that we come from space is not pure. We have actually mitigation for that, which I'll talk in another meeting. But again, it's another factor that actually the way it affects us, science don't even start to understand. They talk about global warming, which may be true or not true, but nobody talks about this type of effect, even though say that they use microwave, the ionized layer, in order to change the weather, but you can do your own investigation. So the point is that we are surrounded not only from ground, but also from space. All right, so let's talk about a few of the most common things that are dangerous for your health. And this is really important because people don't know. Some don't want to know, no matter what you tell them, which is fine because I believe that illness is a gift, and I elaborate on that in my lecture that you can see online, Getting Well is Getting Out of the Box. So people choose to be sick, not consciously or intentionally, obviously, but they need this journey. And it's from any perspective, and certainly our perspective, health problems are actually a gift. They give you opportunity to heal, or I believe you have eternity to learn, so it's no big deal. But let's look at cell phone. This is animal talking on the phone 2 hours a day for 50 days. You see there is bleeding in the brain, and before and after, you see it basically destroying your brain. This is actually a scanning that shows that adult, it's about 25% of the brain, about 10 years old is about, I'd say 70% of the brain, and that 5 years old, 80% of the brain is being cooked. This is really important to understand because you're basically microwaving your brain with microwave radiation. You're cooking your brain. So within 2 minutes, you open your blood-brain barrier, and the blood-brain barrier is a natural barrier in the blood vessels in the brain because many substances, natural substances, proteins, go to the inside the brain, they'll damage it, while they're normal getting in and out in other areas of the body. So you have a natural protection. When this is disrupted, your brain starts to accumulate molecules that actually damage the brain, prevent it to function properly. I already seen 2 people with MS from use cell phone and many other problems, not only in the head like cancer, but also in the rest of the body. Because remember, your brain commands and modulate the body too. Another important piece of information that you really want to know, there's research done in Sweden that showed that when you talk on the phone, especially inside the car, because it's cage, the Faraday cage or metallic cage, so the phone have to work harder to connect with the tower, so pollution much more intense. You immediately reduce your visual fields to tunnel vision, and you're not aware that you're in a tunnel vision. Also, your reflexes are slowed down considerably, so you basically driving without realizing that you're almost blind, plus your time reaction much slower. And that's the reason that many countries it's illegal. It's actually very, very dangerous. And if you see somebody talking on the cell phone around you, be very careful to stay away from them. So that's just for your information. What's interesting that the insurance company that collect all the data, they actually found out that when you talk on the phone, whether it's to your head or hands-free, like Bluetooth, the ratio of accident is the same. It doesn't make any difference. Again, Bluetooth is cooking your brain continuously, and you have in your environment a radio frequency pollution. So keep that in mind. Another source of pollution, which many people are not aware, is the portable phone. The old bed, the new one, the DECT, are actually much worse, more intense pollution than Wi-Fi routers that most people have. You actually need to eliminate them or at least protect them. I'll tell you an interesting story of a patient. She knew better, as one of my patients knew better, but some people know better, but they don't always pay attention to they're being told. And had guests in her house, so she slept next to the Wi-Fi router. Now, the DC phone is several times stronger pollution than the Wi-Fi router, but she slept next to the Wi-Fi router for 3 nights, and she developed excruciating pain in her chest. She goes to the hospital, they do CAT scan, and they find out she had huge mass. Now, the story of this lady was that she had, 20 years ago, they found she had a mediastinal mass, and she had tiny bit of pain, maybe split of a second once every month or 2, totally inconsequential. So the doctor told her, it's not growing, you really don't have any problem, just leave it alone. Within 3 days of being exposed to this radiation, her apparently the mass grew 50%. Now what happened, we treated her with biosyntony, which mitigated this pollution, and within a couple of weeks she was fine. She doesn't want to do CAT scan because of very heavy pollution for the body, and she's clinically fine, just like she was before. So she haven't repeated it yet, but the only explanation is the mass must have been retracted. This is really another example, hopefully be a wake-up call. Just another factor again, be aware that the DCT phone, portable phones, your Wi-Fi transmitter or amplifier or retransmitter for your internet, they can have much longer distance to go and they can actually be amplified. I had a case of people that had, not from her house, but from the environment, very high reading of radio frequency, but they found out that near the piano, because of the metallic cords, in the piano, the pollution was 3 times higher. They removed the piano, the pollution went 3 times lower. So again, that's another factor that you have to measure every place to really know what's going on. Smart meter is a new plague on humanity, and if you check it up online, you understand why. This is the old meter, the analog meter. The classical one have these things that rotate and this little plate, round plate. Some of them are like digital here, but you can see from the plate in the middle that it's analog, not smart meter. Smart meter, actually I don't have a picture, but smart meter will have only digital readout. They are the equivalent of cell phone antenna put on your wall. And many people get very sick from that. It can be, the total radiation could be 50 to 160 times worse than your cell phone, which is very, very bad. You have to do your own investigation. If you're not on my mailing list, I sent everybody recently a text to send to the electric company to refuse or to demand that they remove it. Some will remove it, some give you a hard time. But I know people that have to leave the house, they get so sick. So educate yourself and prevent it from happening. And often, unfortunately, if you have a lot of neighbors around you, they will affect you too, even if you removed yours or don't put one on yours. Another thing is cell phone antenna, TV radio antenna, electric power lines. You have, again, the best is to measure the radio frequency. We have protection for those, which we'll talk briefly. You want to go to antennasearch.com, put your address, and you get within 4 miles all the antennas in your area. Generally speaking, this is true only for city or populated area, not for rural areas. That definitely have to be checked no matter what distance you are. But in cities, I find out that within a mile, you're probably okay. Between mile and half a mile, you start to have a problem. Half a mile, it's becomes serious. And if you have less than quarter of a mile, you need to move or protect yourself. I will encourage everybody, if you haven't yet, go on YouTube or on the internet, search for Barry Trower. He's a scientist that goes all over the world, that talks about it, and his information is really, really important. He tells you a lot of facts, all the scientific research, but talking about how this affects people, he talked to a teacher in Africa, and he got the following story. In that culture, in that country, there is no children misbehavior in school, didn't exist. There was no children suicide. Within 2 years of putting Wi-Fi in the school, obviously they don't have it at home, they start to have child suicide and severe problem misbehavior. Seen in Israel, kids getting sick, they're getting violent. Humanity need to wake up. Just recently in France, they actually banned Wi-Fi in schools, and they actually banned advertising of any Wi-Fi device to children under 14. Don't know what I'm talking about? Do yourself a favor and wake up if you choose to. So refrigerator we already talked about. In your house is very, very important because if you sleep near refrigerator and work near refrigerator, you have much higher risk of cancer and other health problems. This is very, very important. Again, I have several clinical cases that people got cancer because they're sleeping just above a deep freezer, working with refrigeration, slept very close. Again, keep in mind that you may have more than one factor at home. Our recommendation is to everybody to protect your refrigerator and fuse box, and I'll show you the technology and explain it a little bit in more details. And again, the same thing is true for hyperbaric chamber. Now, hyperbaric chamber can save your life if you have the bands from diving, and it can be life-saving or very helpful in acute infection, trauma, stroke. I don't know of any doctor that does hyperbaric chamber, that is aware of the danger of hyperbaric chamber energetically. I'm not saying don't do it, but if you do it indiscriminately, continuously, unnecessarily, it create a lot of problems for the body. Obviously, we actually have mitigation for that, so under optimal circumstances, unfortunately, very few people use this technology that I'm using. If you have to do for clinical reason, could be life-saving, you do hyperbaric chamber treatment, we have biosyntonic program that will regenerate the energy to the body that actually prevent from having the possible side effect, which actually could be deadly. But again, I'll cover it in other lectures. Just one thing, be aware. Noise pollution, obviously, and the reason I'm mentioning it, we have actually technology that will mitigate it by creating natural wave. I'll get into more details. And when you use this mitigation, the noise doesn't change as far as decibel, but it's dramatic change on how your body feels. The irritation, the kind of stress totally kind of goes away, and the noise is much less irritating. Sometimes natural phenomena like earth faults and water wells can create energetic drainage or energetic phenomena. Earth fault, and it doesn't have to be breakage like you see here, but it could be also without any visible break on the ground. Connects the surface with the water in the aquifer, which are in drainage phase, so it drains the energy. And incidentally, if you have break in your house and you have a refrigerator, it will amplify the pollution from the compression of gases, which is an interesting phenomena, and we have mitigation for that too. That's just beyond the scope of this presentation. I'll explore it more in other lectures. Again, I'll mention briefly magnets. It's really important to understand because many people use magnets for clinical purposes. You see, magnets have, again, you measure the power in Gauss, in magnetic field. Magnets are usually the one we use. They're obviously artificially made, but they have very high values. Normal magnetic field, natural field, considered less than half milligauss. Magnets usually have 10 to 1,000 to even tens of thousands Gauss. So they're very, very strong. Now, the reason they work clinically is because if you have inflammation process, the water in your body is stuck in Young phase, which means, or electric phase, which means the molecule cannot contract. And then during the Young phase, which is normally during the day, you accumulate all these toxins in your body. At night, the water molecule contracts and allow drainage in your body, which is the drainage time for your body. So if you have inflammation, one of the reasons the water is stuck in expansion, so you put the magnet and it forces the water to contract and it facilitates the drainage of the toxin from the area. And obviously inflammation, you have swelling, toxicity, toxic materials, and the body reacts to them. So when you put the magnet, it will relieve it. However, because of its strength, which is unnatural, the water gets stuck in contracted position and it loses the ability to expand and contract day and night, and that actually can create problem in the energetic function in your body and eventually can create weakness. So some people intuitively don't want magnets or they get very sick. Those are the sensitive one. Some people don't feel anything, or they can have obviously in acute condition they can have relief or they don't feel anything, but eventually it weakens your body energetically, which predisposes you to illness. A dramatic case that I have, which is interesting because I checked the thing with my patient. This lady had a very interesting story. She was fine. She hurt her knee and she went to the emergency room. They gave her some for pain. She went apparently berserk. They claimed she threatened suicide. She claimed she never did. But anyway, they put her in a mental unit and gave her medications for 3 weeks. Finally, she got away from the ward and she developed severe dizziness. After exploring, investigating, found out that she was sleeping on a mattress which 4 people have to carry. It was so heavy, magnetic mattress for 2 years. And we treated her and she totally recovered. But that's an excellent example where you don't have to get sick when you're exposed to pollution, but it creates underlying weakness, and when there's additional stress on the body, in this case was probably pain medications, your body just falls apart. It can happen in many ways, so I caution people. Now, if you believe that magnet saves your life in a acute condition, I have any problem. But I would be very cautious, use them chronically, and in my book I wouldn't use them at all, but I won't deny that in some cases in acute conditions it may be wise to use them. I have other modalities, more natural, that I believe do the same without any downside, but again, most people don't know what I know about it, and they're not aware of it. I just want to make another point. Unfortunately, people don't have the understanding that I hope you have now, the difference between natural energy and artificial energy. Natural energy done properly, it's always healing, helpful to the body. Artificial energy, yes, you can get results just like with drugs and surgery, but it's not true healing. It actually creates also the effect of suppression, which I explained in another lecture in holistic health. So be really aware that using artificial modalities like electricity, magnets, and so forth, that many good doctors, holistic, wonderful doctors use because they're not aware. They equate energy of any kind with like good healing or natural healing. And nothing could be further from the truth for the reason that I hope you understand now.